Welcome to Tech in the Right Direction, the podcast. Let's take tech in the right direction to drive social change and close the employment, pay, and culture gap for women in technology. This podcast is focused on helping turn ideas into action and create opportunities for women to advance in the dynamic technology industry. I hope this podcast will inspire and motivate you to encourage more women and girls to seek or grow a career as a woman in technology. Stories about the journey of amazing women in the tech field starts right now. Welcome to Tech in the Right Direction, the podcast. This week, I'll be speaking with Eva Helén. Eva is a seasoned business executive and an experienced board member. She has over 20 years of experience in high tech with international business, strategy, operations, and finance. As a co-founder, president, and COO of Sambolic, she oversaw global sales and partner development in the areas of software, IT infrastructure, computing, networking, and cloud technologies, as well as the company's operations and finance. Her new book, Women in Tech, a book for guys, is written for men in tech wanting to make more of a difference for women or for HR professionals, consultants, and executives needing tools to help men increase their gender issue awareness. Women in Tech is a much needed guide for changing the workplace for good. Welcome to the show, Eva. I'm so excited to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. So let's get started. Eva, as a woman in tech, can you share with us your career journey and how you got to where you are today?
Do you really want me to start from the very beginning?
Start from wherever you like, but
okay, yes.
give everybody an idea of how we progress through our career journeys.
So I didn't know anything about technology when I came over from Europe 25 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But I landed in Silicon Valley and thought that, somebody must want me here. Look at all these big companies. And I kind of knocked on doors until I got my first job in tech. And as I spoke some languages, I was able to get a job in international sales. And I found the technology was incredibly fascinating. So then I actually went on to co-founding a couple of software companies, both with good exits. The second one we ran for 15 years, and we were acquired by Citrix in 2015. But throughout my entire career in tech, I kind of always felt like I should know more about technology. And still, people were always telling me that I knew way more than your average salesperson. But I think it was mostly because I cared so much, not just about the technology itself, but what it could actually do for potential customers, that I wanted the depth knowledge. But I had years when every Sunday I would say, "Oh, I wish I was an engineer. Maybe I should go back to school." And the response was always, "Well, you have enough people around you to support you and help you." And that was obviously true. But I love technology in all of its forms, not consumer technology as much as data center technology, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm also, very fascinated with working with and selling to the people who are in that world. I find it very fascinating.
That's awesome. Did you, what was that moment that you knew you wanted to be in tech? What did that feel like? What was it? Did somebody introduce you to tech? Tell me just a little bit about how did you get attracted to tech?
I think I was just driving around in Silicon Valley and just,
Uh-huh.
seeing all those companies and thinking somebody must want me. I mean, I had finished my education in Sweden. And I always thought that I was going to work with people. I was going to work in HR, organizational behavior, or anything sort of a little bit softer side,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps a supporting role. I didn't think of myself at all as an entrepreneur. I had never been a big risk taker and still tend to be a little bit more conservative, perhaps, than your average entrepreneur. Um, so it was just, one step led to the next. And then once I was into the first company that I was part of founding, it was very tangible back then. It wasn't all virtual and virtual servers
Mhm.
and a virtual environment. It was actually, we were building servers and installing motherboards and pulling cables and building
Mhm.
storage solutions. And it was very easy, I think, or I imagine that it was easier to learn back then than perhaps now, where everything is, it's there, but it's virtual, and it's more difficult to get an in-depth understanding of data center technology if you're not in the middle of it, like
Right.
physically. I think, but I don't know. I haven't talked to anybody about that specifically who's like 25 years younger and can tell me exactly how they have learned.
Or if somebody has done some of both, right, to kind of compare.
Yeah.
Because I also was in that on-prem world in IT, and it was easier to navigate. It was easier to troubleshoot, I think.
Mm,
Uh, Something silly as an example is, when we went from DOS to Windows,
mm.
people were just, to do help desk or to be able to troubleshoot their problems, it was very difficult because they go click happy, is what I would call it. And they didn't even know what they clicked on. So it was very hard to replicate that same situation,
Yeah.
as it was in DOS. DOS was command prompt and you knew what, you were doing. It
Yep.
either did it or it didn't. So I think you're right there. It's not as complex
Yeah.
when you have it on prem, but the cloud kind of makes it, or data centers make it a little more complex, that it's hard to navigate or troubleshoot, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and it was so I really, like, through my education, and I didn't really know anything about technology, but one thing led to the next. And we had our first company was acquired by Autodesk, and then we started Sambolic right after that. And we actually built a clustered file system, and built the first kind of geo-distributed clusters of data before cloud. So it was an interesting time, and it was a very long journey, and the technology that we built was incredibly complex. And obviously,
Mhm.
I didn't take part of the development um, of the product. I just had it explained to me, and then I went on to selling it.
So what was the entrepreneur bug? What happened that made you say, oh, I want to start a company?
Oh, I didn't. So part of, the story that is now starting to come out, which is really fascinating, and the space that I'm in right now is, and it's funny, even after all these years, I kind of hesitate a little bit when I share this big part of my story, as we talk a lot about being transparent and being authentic and
Mhm.
bringing our whole selves to work and all of that stuff. I never did, because I actually ran these companies together with my husband,
Mhm.
and nobody knew that we were married.
Mm. That's
So
interesting.
yes, it's a very interesting story. And I actually, now I kind of enjoy talking about it. But it wasn't, of course, the people that worked for us and everybody who was at the company and very close to us, they all knew. But when it came to partners or customers or resellers, anything like that, they didn't know, because we felt that it shouldn't matter.
Shouldn't matter, right?
And same thing
You think
with
that's a culture thing? Do you think that was
well,
a culture thing, or was it really, a business related?
no, it was a business thing. I mean, purely because it was almost like, well, it's not nobody's business, right? What
Mhm.
we do in our personal time doesn't have anything to do with how we're running the company and how we're doing it and how we're building it, and the relationships that we're building with partners and customers and investors and, potentially VCs. And then you get to a certain point in relationships where you kind of have to disclose things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, I was my own person, and I was not, we were not, and he was doing his thing. So he was doing product and marketing, and I was doing sales operations and finance. And it was never an issue ever. It was actually pretty fascinating, and it was really hard when we actually stopped working together, because that's all we knew. We had never done anything other than
Mm.
work together. Um,
So who was
and
the boss?
it depends. I mean, it was, I think, when it came to product and marketing, he was the boss, and
Yep.
when it
That's
came
great.
to sales operations and finance, I was the boss. I mean,
That's great.
we complement each other, and still to this day, we're still
Mm-hmm.
married.
That's awesome.
But yeah, so he is the entrepreneur, to answer
Mm-hmm.
your question,
Okay.
and
Okay.
I'm more of the conservative person. So there is the nice balance where um, that we found.
That is really a nice balance because women tend to be more conservative. And I always use this analogy is that, men entrepreneurs will say, let's build it and they will come. And I say, bring them here first and then I'll build it. A
Yeah.
little more conservative. So I think, yeah, I think that blend is very healthy.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it worked out well for us, for sure.
Very nice. So you're an author as well. So tell us about your book.
So when we were then done with Sambolic, we had been moved over to back to the West Coast, and I was networking a lot and running a lot to women's events, women in business, women in tech, any kind of networking events that I could find. And I spoke at a lot of them as a successful female entrepreneur
Mhm.
in the enterprise software space. There was a lot of people wanted to hear that success story, so that was fun. But I thought it was really strange that there were no men present at all these events
Mhm.
where women were getting together and talking about, potentially what they could do with their careers, and what was the next move, and what were the things that were painful and good and bad and so on. So I started something called Women in Tech Events for Guys through my company, Q
Nice.
Inspiration.
That's awesome.
And, women were absolutely very welcome, but they couldn't come without bringing a man along.
Mm.
And so that's how I got 55, 60% men in the audience. And I would have women like you share your story about, somebody who had mentored you, or maybe a
Mm-hmm.
good sponsor or a good manager that you had
Mm-hmm.
sometime in your career. And then I would have a panel of men on stage who I would interview and talk to them about um, their willingness to support women and minorities, their awareness around inequality in the workplace, and what actions they were actually taking. And all these amazing stories came to light, and I thought, this is fantastic. How can I get more of these stories and share them with a broader audience?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I decided to start doing interviews, not really with the plan of writing a book. I didn't really know where it was going to take me, but I
Mm-hmm.
did 60 um, hour-long interviews with men in tech, from CEOs to individual contributors, and interviewed them about everything, like their background, how they grew up, what their parents were like, if they had any sisters, brothers, to if there was a moment kind of when they realized that they were perhaps treated differently than other people. And did that aha moment occur in college or in their first job, or when did that happen? And then going on to asking about their willingness to support women and minorities at work. And again, what actions were they actually taking? And then I took all of that material and looked for patterns, and was able to define 7 character prototypes of men at work. And the idea to the book, which is called Women in Tech, a book for guys, is that a man can identify with one of these character prototypes and then ask himself, would I like to do something more for women and minorities at work? And if the answer is yes, then simply read what the character prototype above his is already doing. So I'm not going to tell him what to do, but he can read about examples and quotes and stories of what guys one step above him on this matrix is already doing and imitate and do more of those actions to graduate to the next level.
I love this. Wow. This is so amazing because, I started my podcast for women, and then
Mhm.
I just added a section called Mentors That Make a Difference, which is men and male allies, really. And so we have a lot in common in that thought process. And then one of our women in tech meetings, I proposed the male perspective. And I got a lot of grief for that because they're like, why do we need men to tell us what to do? And it's like, no, it's understanding how they think and what they see. And what we found is that the men were so much more complimentary of women and wanting to help, but women were their own worst enemies, basically.
Mm.
And so it was really interesting. So this is fascinating what you're saying that you did. And I was going to ask you with the commonalities, with the 60 interviews that you did you find anything that kind of repeated over and over and over again? Was there a pattern?
Well, so out of these 7 character prototypes, I've divided them into 3 groups. So the top 3 are called the advocates, the
Mm-hmm.
middle 3 are called um, the allies, and then
Mm-hmm.
at the bottom we have the chauvinist. And the
Mm-hmm.
biggest group are the allies. And your mentor that you're talking about, he also
Mm-hmm.
falls into that middle category. He's the
Yeah.
top of those 3.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, based on my research, I've found that 65% of men fall into that group.
That's very interesting.
And so, yes, there are a lot of recurring patterns, but those 3 character prototypes, they all have names.
Mm-hmm.
Those 3 are called Memo, Al, and Cree. Memo is
Mm-hmm.
the mentor, Al is the happy go lucky ally, and Cree is friendly, wants to support, but doesn't even think that he's already doing anything. So you have to dig a little bit deeper and you have to kind of ask him and say, well, do you have a partner? Do you have a sister? Do you have anybody that
Mm-hmm.
you know who you've supported? Maybe a woman you've worked with for a long time. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I just helped my daughter get into college. Helped her with her application. Well, you see, you are helping somebody. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's a lack of awareness at the bottom of those 3 character prototypes.
Mm-hmm.
And then Al, who's in the middle of them, is a huge group and really great potential to grow because his willingness to help is extremely high, but he
Mm-hmm.
doesn't know what to do.
Wow. Yeah. Yep.
And then the one above that is Memo, the mentor that you're talking about. And
Mm-hmm.
he is, especially when there's formalized mentorship programs and a structure around it, he's very good, and is comfortable helping and supporting women. If there's no structured program and he gets questioned, he may back away and feel a little bit insecure because he's not 100% sure like how to act, or if
Mm-hmm.
people are
What's
questioning his
right, the right
motives.
thing to say? Yeah.
And then the biggest difference between that group, the allies and the advocates, is really that the allies are still very much focused on, um, not focused on, I mean, they obviously are helping others, but they're still looking to themselves. They're
Mm-hmm.
still a little bit concerned about how their actions may affect their careers. They still look at themselves in the mirror a little bit more than the advocates who have shifted their focus entirely to other people.
Mm-hmm. So interesting. So interesting. I'm ready to buy your book and read it. Um, it's going to give me a lot of insight. So, what should men be doing to facilitate gender equality? Give me like the top 3 things they could do.
Okay, so once again, the reason I created the 7 character prototypes is because there is not one answer for all of these 7 people or
Mm-hmm.
characters. It's very different. And we have to be super respectful of the guys who are at the bottom of this matrix, the
Mm-hmm.
ones who are, the chauvinist is at the very
Mm-hmm.
bottom. He goes by the name Richard. and he is opposed to change. He doesn't want things to change. He's afraid that women are going to take over the positions of men in the workplace. But we can't judge him because of that. There's a reason why he's like that. And so the finding the different motivators for different characters is really important. So somebody like Richard might only be motivated by facts. So giving him the statistics, 53% of all college graduates are women, 74% of all professional computing positions are held by men. In 2025, we're going to be whatever it is, 1.2 million people short staff
Mhm.
in the tech
Mhm.
industry, giving him this kind of stuff that might motivate him. And then giving him an opportunity to work with other men to support a single woman. So maybe there's one woman on their team and they together are supporting her as she's going on maternity leave. And he might be comfortable with that, but not doing anything on his own.
Okay.
And then as you climb, like I mentioned, a few different things that the allies are doing. But then if you graduate all the way up to the advocates, when you move from Memo, the mentor, to the next level, which is the lowest one of the advocates, Samir, who's a sponsor, it's a huge step because
Mhm.
all of a sudden he is putting his own name on the line to promote other people. And so,
Mhm.
one tangible thing that somebody like Samir does is he provides introductions, and he does them in a way where it's not just throwing out, two random names, but really offering women introductions that they may not be able to get to otherwise without this specific connection. It's making a woman visible both in a meeting or because she has accomplished or done something. So it's a
Mhm.
little bit higher up, but obviously all eyes are on him as he's doing this. And then the next step above that is not just supporting a single person at a time, perhaps multiple people, but one at a time. The
Mhm.
next one is really to start to change the culture inside the company. So when you get to that level, it is a leader, it's somebody who can really stand for this, it's somebody who understands why it's important to define what the values is of the company and how are we going to change things on our team or in this company to make a more inclusive environment. So I'm only mentioning this because there is not a single answer. This is what
Mhm.
all men should do. I usually say that regardless if you're starting at the bottom of the matrix or if you're at the very top, there are three key things that I point to that are really important. One is improving in communication. So,
Mhm.
communication between people and communication, as we know, you're very patiently, for example, right now, listening to me because you don't know what's coming next. You have no idea what I'm going to say. So, you're listening. That's a
Mhm.
good form of communication. The next thing is to elevate each other rather than pushing each other down. It's so incredibly easy for us to use all of our power to push each other down. And it's much more difficult to use all of that power to elevate and lift each other up. And I
Mhm.
think that, for me personally, that's been an incredibly important thing throughout my career. Like I said, my partner is also my husband. And we
Mhm.
decided we're very powerful people. And we decided very early on in our career and our life together that we were going to use all of our power to lift each other up and never to push each other down.
That's great.
And it's pretty magical. And you can do that with anybody, your
Sure.
children,
Sure.
your partner, your business friends, anybody.
Mhm.
And then
As
the
long as you
last,
make that the focus, you'll do it. Yep.
yes. And then lastly, no judgment because we don't know why people act and behave the way they do. And so we can hear them out or we can let them be and we can accept them for what they are. And should they aspire to grow a little bit more, do a little bit more of something, then we can encourage them to do that and we can help them by giving them, specific advice. So those three things are commonalities between all the steps.
Incredible information. I'm just so fascinated by the research that you did and some of the results that you've gotten. But I completely agree. Communication, elevating each other, and no judgment. You can never go wrong with those three. So that's awesome.
Did you know that there is an increase in the number of women leaving the tech industry? As a woman-owned business, Directions Training has made it our mission and passion to change this statistic. That's why Jennifer created this podcast. We showcase insight from everyday women for everyday women in the tech industry. Do you know other people that would benefit from tuning in? Share the link and help us drive the advancement of women in the tech industry. Do you have a journey or know of someone that our listeners would benefit from hearing about? Reach out to us at directionstraining.com/podcast. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and wherever you find your podcasts. Now, back to the show.
Um, so since gender diversity is so critical for business, what are the benefits that you find of female teams in an organization? What are some of the things they bring to the table?
Are you referring to kind of a mix of men and women, or do you mean just women on a team?
I say, the men and women, but what do the female part of the team bring to an organization so that organizations who are thinking of DEI and, bringing more women in tech, what can they see that we bring to the table that sometimes a man cannot?
Well, I don't know that it's a specific thing for women, but we
Mm-hmm.
do tend to um, think and discuss and question things in a different way. And this is like we're generalizing like crazy here because there's a lot of women who are like men and a lot of
Sure,
men who are like
sure.
women. But
Yes.
but the fact is that when you get a mix of different backgrounds and not just so it's more of a diversity of thought or how we process things and how we communicate and how we draw conclusions and how we remember things. um, we tend to as women to do it differently than men, so
Mm-hmm.
it's not necessarily better or worse.
No,
It's
I don't
just
think it's
that,
better, but it's more
yeah,
collaborative, right? I
yeah.
think women do more collaboration than men do.
But the thing is that for men, if you only put men in a room, so there's an interesting, there's some interesting studies on group constellations.
Mm-hmm.
So with men, they have very clear hierarchies. So if you work with a group of, let's say, 7 men,
Mm-hmm.
there is one who is at the top of that hierarchy, and then and one person who is at the bottom. And then when you take one person out of this mix, there is a 72-hour shuffle. You can literally hear it. And then the configuration is going to change slightly. Maybe somebody
Wow.
goes up a level, maybe another one goes down a level, maybe it's going to be the same leader. And then if you remove that leader, you're going to have another reshuffle. And then after 72 hours, you have a new structure. And that structure holds until somebody else gets removed or somebody else gets added to the group. With women, we tend to go in every day and without saying a word to each other, sense who is stronger and who is weaker that day, who needs support, and who can we lift forward and to be the spokesperson for our group. And that means that women with it's unconscious, but we do tend to want to prove ourselves all the
Mm-hmm.
time, over and
Mm-hmm.
over every day, because that's just how we function. And it's kind of like a support mechanism. So if I'm having a terrible day and you walk into the room without me even saying anything, you can see that I've had a rough morning. And so you'll
Mm-hmm.
fill in and you'll help me out and you'll speak up on my behalf if need
Mm-hmm.
be. And I will do the same for you. So it gets really interesting when you have a mix of men and women in a group because men can question, like, why are these women, why do they need to prove themselves over and over? Why do they always? But that's just because we work differently in a group setting than men do.
Mm-hmm.
And we as women also have to remember that there is a very particular hierarchy among the men who are in the room. And we need to pay attention to the men who are not speaking up as much, who perhaps are sitting quietly with their ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So I think just a general awareness of that we do function differently. And like you're saying, yes, there's a lot of collaboration, a lot of invisible support between women.
Mm-hmm.
that perhaps men don't spend as much time on. What we can learn from men is that when there's a conflict, they can easily brush it off and walk out of the meeting and be perfectly fine.
Yes, yes.
So we can both learn from both sides, right?
Completely agree. Completely agree. So you've had a very successful and a very impressive career. What do you attribute your success to? If there was a couple things that you say, this is why I was so successful, what would they be?
Oh, that's a difficult question. I do attribute a lot of it to the support that I've always received from my family.
Yep.
Both, my husband, my children, my parents. I was so fortunate. I had an amazing upbringing. And I do recognize that often, because it's not, there's very few people, I think. I mean, there's a lot of pain and suffering, and a lot of it comes from family constellations and expectations and things like that. My parents have always been very, very supportive, and they still are to this day. So I want to attribute a lot of it to them. I think being in competitive sports is a big part of it. I'm super competitive. But I'm a great believer in people. It doesn't matter if I'm selling a clustered file system or a book that's about, how men and women can support each other better in tech. I get really passionate about stuff because there's people behind everything. And every time I have an opportunity to interview and speak to people, it's like I get more energy from that. So I think it's my passion for people and understanding and learning that is really the most important. And I'm extremely tenacious. I think people would say I just
think
don't
that's
give up
true.
very easily.
Yes, that's definitely a quality that makes you successful. So that's great. So, Eva, who inspires you and why? Where do you get your inspiration?
I'm constantly looking for new inspiration. I'm always trying to broaden my mind. I have to say I was incredibly fascinated. I just read Dave Grohl's book, The Storyteller, and to be inspired in a way where you walk away from a book feeling like you're alive and you're ready to, share the love, basically. That was really fast. So that's the last one I just read. And then, people who have done a lot of studies. I'm just reading Chipola's books about stupidity and intelligence. So I get inspiration from anywhere and everywhere, and I try to remember to ask people what they're reading,
Yeah.
because I think it's important to constantly feed the mind from all kinds of angles, so that we don't stop growing.
Great, 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 great. So, what is your proudest professional moment? Can you tell us about it?
I think it was when we were acquired by Citrix. It was, it had been a long time coming. We had been running Symbolic for 15 years. And in 2008, we were, very close to being acquired by Microsoft, and that went down the drain when the whole economy tanked. So it was a long and really, really tough recovery. So the peak of all of that was obviously when we were finally acquired. But it wasn't one that wasn't, of course it's the peak because it's like you reach the ultimate goal that you've been working so hard to achieve. But at the same time, I can be just as proud of juggling, the family and travel and work, all of those years. I could be super proud of those, because all of those years and the patience that the kids showed, and I was constantly on the road, and they turned out beautifully. I have 3 amazing children, and that's I'm more proud of that really. But professionally, like if you want
Mhm.
one specific moment, it's probably, when the acquisition was um, announced. And there's a little bit of a um, there's a little bit of a downside to that story as well, which you can read about in the book. But yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
That's great. And you should be proud. That is a very, very big moment to say you've achieved that success that you've been striving for. So, as entrepreneurs, we do a lot to keep businesses running, to grow them, to maintain culture, to maintain happy employees. It's a lot of work. So that is a very proud moment. And even though you were traveling, I'm sure you gave the attention to your kids that they needed and the support that they needed, that they turned out so beautifully because you did lead them to good habits and good behaviors and just good people. So great, great job.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah.
as a successful leader, in closing, what advice would you give to a woman that might be considering a career in the tech industry?
Go for it.
Yes.
It's the best place to be. There is, amazing people that to meet. There is fantastic technologies to learn. There is money to be made. And the tech industry needs you desperately.
You summed it up beautifully. I've done a lot of podcasts, but you summed it up beautifully. So, yes, go for it, is also my advice. So, Eva, this has been such an honor and such a joy to have a conversation with you. Thank you for being on the show. And I look forward to you coming back, many more times. But in the meantime, could you share with our listeners how they could get a hold of you?
LinkedIn is where I live. So just Eva Helen on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter, and my website is eqinspiration.com.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you again. Truly appreciate you and all the work that you're doing. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to Tech in the Right Direction. Please take a minute to subscribe or follow so that you never miss an episode. Also, don't forget to like, share, and comment. Thank you. See you next week.
From IT skill enhancements to end-user adoption training, Directions Training is your resource to help optimize the effectiveness of your technology investments. Over 500,000 students have taken advantage of our wide selection of technology and business training solutions covering the most popular applications today, such as Microsoft 365, Azure, Windows 10, and more. As a podcast listener, we invite you to take advantage of an exclusive offer. Receive 30 days of free access to our Microsoft official curriculum on-demand courses for IT professionals or end users. Visit us at www.directionstraining.com/podcast to claim this offer today. Hurry, this offer is only available for a limited time. Success is a journey. Ask for directions.